cover basically what Allah Azza wa Jal has to say about the month of Ramadan and the institution of fasting. The first point I'd like to make to you is that the purpose of fasting is different and the purpose of Ramadan is different. I'll say that again because it's a difficult thing to grasp. The purpose of fasting is something else and the purpose of Ramadan is something else. And Allah decided in His book to tell us the purpose of fasting first. So we're going to think about that without thinking about Ramadan. Usually we kind of mix these things together, yeah? But we're not going to do that today. We're going to separate those two things because Allah Himself separated those two things, okay? So this is our section 1. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Those of you who believe, fasting was made mandatory upon you. كتب عليكم. It was made law binding upon you. كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم, just as it was on those who came much before you. This ayah is actually talking about the institution of fasting before Ramadan. How many days did I say? Just 3. Just 3. So you're going to fast just like they fasted. So we're starting with the common, not the different one. But interestingly, Allah used the word siyam, not sawm. He used the word siyam and not sawm. Now for Arabic students, the masdar could be sawm and it could be siyam. Sama yasumu sawman, sama yasumu siyaman. But they're not, in the precise usage of the Quran, they're not synonymous. They're not the same. The word sawm in the Quran is used for a special kind of fast that the Israelites used to observe, in which they wouldn't even speak. Inni nadhartu lirrahmani sawman. And when you say sawman, that means falan ukallima nas. Okay, فَلْيَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. I'm not going to talk to any human being. Not only was it a fasting of food and drink and intimacy, it was also a fasting of speech itself. That was part of their law. For us, the fasting of speech was loosened. But the Prophet ﷺ made it spiritual advice. In other words, you'll find prophetic traditions telling you that your eyes are also fasting, your tongue is also fasting, your hands are also fasting. But that's not made part of the law. It's not like if you kind of blurted out something in anger, your fast broke, right? So that was actually the enhancing the spirit of the fast, but not the legal requirements of the fast. But for the Israelites before us, the fasting was actually much more difficult, and the term for it in the Quran is actually sawm. And then the new institution of fasting, what's the term? Siyam. So that's this term that's made specific for the month of Ramadan. But anyway, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. At least the siyam part of it is the same as what it was. كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم, as just as it was mandated on those who came much before you. And then Allah tells us the purpose. The purpose is لعلكم تتقون, so that all of you may develop a sense of protecting yourselves, caution, care. You know, you can say fear, but fear is really not a good description of the word taqwa. So I'd like to take a moment to just tell you a little bit about the concept of taqwa. The word taqwa comes from the Arabic word wiqaya. The original word is waqayaqi wiqayatan. And wiqaya in Arabic means to protect. Like waqina adhab an-nar, protect us from the punishment of the fire. To protect yourself, you say ittaqa yattaqi. So فَكَيْفَ تَتَّقُونَ إِن كَفَرْتُمْ يَوْمَ يَجْعَلُ الْوِلْدَانَ شِيبًا. How will you protect yourself on the day of judgment if you disbelieve? The day on which a baby's hair turns gray. The idea of protecting yourself. Okay. Now, when somebody protects themselves, like they lock the door, or they close the window, you know, or they put the security alarm on, or whatever, they only do that because there's an actual real danger. And that's why by association people use the term fear. But it's actually what you do as a result of fear. That's taqwa. Taqwa is not fear itself. Somebody could be afraid and not take any precautions. They don't have taqwa. But somebody who, out of fear, locked the doors, got out of the bad neighborhood, sped up the car, whatever they did, that's an act of taqwa. You understand? So it's actually taking protective measures to secure yourself from any kind of trouble. That's actually what taqwa is. Okay? Taqwa can have a positive connotation too. It's not just protect yourself against danger, but when you take the proper precautions to not get in trouble with your dad, or with your mom, or with your spouse, or in our case, to not make Allah upset. When you protect yourself from, for example, I know that I'm going to fall asleep, so I'm going to finish my homework before I fall asleep. I'll just do it early, because I know I have time right now and I'm feeling lazy, but I know if I delay it to 7, I'm not going to do it. That's an act of taqwa. You protected yourself from your own shortcomings. You took proper precaution. And that's why you'll find even, one of the places in Quran, actually in Surah Al-Baqarah, when you're preparing for Hajj. When you prepare for Hajj, you have to have a lot of savings. You have to pack properly, right? And it's going to be, back in the day, a really long journey. So you really have to make sure you pack. And you're going to be in the desert. So if you don't have the right supplies, You're gonna die. So Allah says, وَتَزَوَّدُوا, pack up. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. The best kind of provision you can have is taqwa, meaning take proper precaution. Not just taqwa of Allah, but that's a comprehensive phrase saying, look, be safe. Don't go to like unsavory roads and neighborhoods. Don't talk to strangers. Make sure you defend yourself properly. That's actually within the meanings of taqwa. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because Allah has done something remarkable. Taqwa is something talked about over 200 times in the entire Quran. One of the if not the most repeated theme in the Quran is taqwa. And you've heard probably countless khutbahs before you fell asleep. You heard that it's about taqwa. Today, brothers and sisters, I'm going to talk to you about taqwa. You had plenty of those. Everybody says you have to have taqwa, you have to have taqwa, you have to have taqwa, but it's not on sale after the salah, it's outside. I don't know where to get it from. You have this concept. How am I supposed to put it in myself? I've heard that it's really important and I better have it, right? But it's an abstract thing. That's the beauty of our religion. It takes these ideas and then Allah will give us in His book a practical way of bringing it inside you. So it doesn't just hover as a philosophical concept, something called taqwa. I guess some people have it, I don't have it. No, Allah will actually give you training exercises that you can implement and through them get taqwa. And one of the most powerful ones of them is what? Fasting. Fasting will give you taqwa. Fasting is hope to give you. Now, if fasting was guaranteed to give you taqwa, here's what you would have read. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لِتَتَّقُوا. The lam would have been lam al-ta'leel. لِتَتَّقُوا would have meant so that you have taqwa. When you say لَعَلَّكُمْ, there's a hope that you might get it, but there's not a guarantee. There's not a guarantee. Okay? So Allah is saying this is a way to get it, but only if you do it right. It's not like anybody who's going to fast is going to get taqwa. So let's explore that concept a little bit. How does fasting lead to taqwa? The idea of being cautious of Allah, protective, secure about Allah. Very simply put. I don't want to get technical with you on this, and I'm not going to give you elaborate quotes. My intention, by the way, today is not to be academic. I'm giving this lecture as a teacher. I'm not a scholar anyway, but not as a researcher. So I'm not trying to, present you with scholarly research from this source and that source. I've done that homework, and I'm trying to present it in as easy language as I possibly can, inshallah. Okay. So now let's talk about this. When you're fasting, especially if you're fasting in an interesting hot place like Texas in the summer, right? Or in the Khalij somewhere, or in Pakistan, or wherever, South Africa. When you're fasting, you're gonna feel thirst. And it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, or old or young. It doesn't discriminate. Thirst doesn't discriminate. Hunger doesn't discriminate. You're gonna feel hunger. And that feeling inside of you is basically your body asking you to disobey Allah. Isn't it? I mean, every ounce of thirst, every second of thirst that you feel, your body is screaming, give me water. Your stomach is really almost coming up with a song on its own. Feed me. There's a war happening inside you. Your body is asking you to rebel against Allah. And there's something in your heart that tells your throat and your stomach to shut up. Not until Maghrib. Not until Maghrib. You're fighting yourself the entire day. Yourself the entire day. There's a newlywed couple. He's crazy about her. He just looks at her and he goes, what am I supposed to do? Not until Maghrib. I'm going to hold myself back because I'm fasting. There's the strongest of the urges, intimacy. And of course, the most basic of needs, hunger and thirst. Allah blocked them for the entirety of the day. And you and I, if we're observing our fast, we're crushing the needs and the strongest desires of our body for the entirety of a day, only to make Allah happy. Only to make Allah happy. And there's a kid who's 12 years old or 10 years old, he's fasting for the first time, and he's looking at this melted piece of chocolate, and he's got a little thing of it on and he's just looking at it and he puts it back. Even he's got taqwa. And then you're gonna do this. Every time you do this, you're developing a consciousness of Allah. Why is that exercise important? If you can do that through the entirety of a day to block yourself and deny yourself the most fundamental of your needs and the strongest of your wants. If you're capable of doing that, then Allah is asking you for a lot less outside of the fast. He's asking you to actually يُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. The only thing He wants to prevent from you are filthy things. you're going to have a much easier time dealing with other acts of obedience of Allah. It's trained you. It's beautiful. You know, I put it this way. When, you know, for any tough job, like a rigorous training, like a military training or police academy training, these kinds of trainings, there's a lot of tough exercise, yeah? And they go through hours and hours of regiments and trainings. And then that same guy decides to join some kind of light gym. And they have a workout routine. And he says, this is a joke. We used to do 10 times this much. Yeah? So when he's come through a much tougher training, anything less is piece of cake, effortless. That's the idea of fasting. It's so tough. So when you're done with this, what Allah is going to ask you after that is piece of cake. You're ready for it. You'll develop the consciousness of Allah, and you'll be much better able to protect yourself from disobeying Allah. Now look at the beautiful words. Ayyaman ma'dudat. Days that are very, very limited in number. The words ma'dudat with the alif and ta suggest what's called in Arabic jam'u qilla. Less than 10. How many days did I say they were? That's why we're learning that these are the three. And you can call out in this audience. It's okay. Though people around the world can hear you, it's fine. Inshallah. But I need to, when I ask you a rhetorical question, call it out. And those of you that are watching online, get weird and speak to the phone or the iPad or whatever you're watching on, inshallah. It's okay. So there were only 3 days of fasting, yeah? So Allah says just a limited number of days. So this is pre-Ramadan discussion. This has nothing to do with Ramadan. All Allah is describing is fasting itself. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. And whoever among you had been sick, or whoever among you had been traveling, then they can make up in other days. One way to make up for the fast, if you missed a fast because you were sick or travel, is that you can just make up another day. Yeah? That's option one. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ. And those who are capable to do so, they can actually give an expiation, meaning a compensation. You can say you can pay a fine. Okay, pay a penalty for missing a fast. So this is option number 2. I need you to remember these 2 options. The first option is you can make it up. The second option is you can pay a fine. And what's that fine? Allah will explain Himself. طَعَامُ miskin. The food of a person who can't help himself. Miskin is someone who's stuck in a situation and can't help themselves. The beauty of this phrase, often missed in translation, Allah did not say إِطْعَامُ miskin. إِطْعَامُ miskin would have been translated feeding of the poor. Feeding of the poor. But ta'am cannot be translated as feeding. It can only be translated as food. Ta'am and ta'am are worlds apart. Now when you say feeding, like feeding of the poor, then you did something out of your way. But when you say food of the poor, it actually means the food belonged to them. It was theirs to begin with. You understand? In it there's a hint that fast or no fast, give the poor what they deserve. It's theirs to begin with. You're not going out of your way to do them a favor, right? So in any case, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. And then Allah goes on His own and says, and whoever wants to volunteer out of goodness, then it's better for them. Meaning volunteer, meaning make up the fast and give someone food. Good for them. وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And if you were to fast to begin with, in other words, not miss, it's better for you. وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Some have also interpreted this, yes, you can give voluntarily to somebody, but the better of the 2 options is make it up. Make it up, right? So وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If in fact you've known. Now what we've learned thus far is this is what we had in common with the people that came before us. This is the fasting that was in common, and there was 2 ways of getting out of a fast that you missed. I asked you to remember both of those, making it up or the meal of a poor person, yeah? Now we get to the next section. This is now section 2. That was section 1. We'll compare it to section 2. Section 2 is Ramadan itself. The spirit of Ramadan itself. Inside of one ayah, Allah captures the whole thing. He says, Shahru Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an. The one in which the Qur'an was sent down. The month of Ramadan, now Allah has changed the subject. First of all, He's talking about an entire month, which is very different from 3 days. Second of all, He didn't start with fasting. The subject isn't fasting anymore. The thing you need to know about the month of Ramadan, what makes it important, is what? That the Qur'an was sent down in it. He changed the subject altogether. And I would argue for us as a Muslim culture around the world, that reorientation needs to happen. Our minds, consciously or subconsciously, associate Ramadan with hunger and thirst. and be more importantly associated with fried foods at Maghrib time. Right? That's, in our minds, it's whose iftar party are we going to tomorrow? And how many are we going to hold at our place? It's just become, it's a festive thing, it's a beautiful thing, yes, but the spirit of it, the purpose of it, when Allah spoke about it, the first thing He told me and you is, this month is valuable because the Quran was sent down in it. الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ. I would argue that for myself, this is what I'm going to do as an exercise for myself, and I try to do this every Ramadan. I actually remind myself of this statement of Allah every morning in Ramadan. This is the month in which Quran came down. This is the month in which the course of humanity shifted. The map of the world changed because of this one month. Billions of lives have been transformed. Families and lineages and heritages have been completely transformed because of this one month. If you think of all of humanity, all human history as one lifetime, if all of human history is one lifetime, then the month of Ramadan is not even a second. It's not even a second, but it constitutes the most important turning point in human history. That 1 second, the course of humanity changes forever. And it changes in more significant a way than has ever happened in the entire span of humanity. Subhanallah, that is the month we're experiencing. That is the month Allah Azza wa Jalla is highlighting. And I make it a point to say that because if Allah can transform the course of the future of humanity in that 1 month, how much change can He bring into my life in that 1 month? If that month has the power to transform the entire world, entire civilizations. I mean, I think about the fact that I'm Muslim, but my heritage, some of it goes back to India, some of it goes back to Afghanistan, and all of those are actually go further back enough, they're pagan traditions. They're either Buddhism or some kind of Hinduism and some kind of ism. And you know what? Those isms became Islam at one point in our lineage, in some part of our heritage, and all of that started because of this month. I have Islam today because of this month. We have the Quran today because of this month. Subhanallah. Like, just to remind yourself of that through the course of these 30 days. Why is it that we're celebrating Ramadan? What's so amazing about Ramadan? You know? And now he says, now the next quality of Ramadan, which this is the orientation of Ramadan, yeah? Hudan lin-nas. There are going to be 3 things that are going to be said about the Quran. Okay, I have to keep track of time because there's lots of stuff to talk about. But there's three things that are going to be said about the Quran. The first thing will be hudan lin-nas, guidance for humanity. The second thing that will be said is bayyinatin min al-huda, clear proofs from within guidance. Clear, self-evident proofs from within guidance. Now that sounds kind of weird. I'll explain what that means in a second. So far 2 things. What were they? Guidance for humanity and clear proofs from within guidance. And then wal furqan. The third is the separator or the separation. You can say the ultimate separation. That's a good way of thinking about al-furqan. The old English word they use is criterion. I've never used that word in my life, so I don't like to use it because separation is, or powerful separation is what you can say, okay? Now what are these 3 words about? First thing to note is this is a surah revealed while most of the Quran has already been revealed. 2/3 of the Quran has already come down. The Prophet is now in Medina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he's in Medina and this ayah comes down, Sahaba are familiar with the Quran or no? They're very familiar with the Quran. Now, are they familiar with the fact that the Quran is guidance for humanity? They're extremely familiar with that. This is not some new information. Okay. Are they familiar that it has proofs of itself within the guidance? They are. Are they familiar with the fact that the Quran is the ultimate separation between right and wrong? What I'm trying to get at then is as though this ayah is introducing us to 3 things about the Quran, but for anyone who's been with the Prophet ﷺ for years and years and years, none of this is new, is it? Why is he mentioning it then? It's as though he's giving us an orientation or an introduction to the Quran, but why would you give an introduction all the way like 13 years in, 14 years in? You know why? Because now you're learning a timeless lesson about the month of Ramadan. Every Ramadan, I will come to the Quran like I just got introduced to it. I will make no assumptions about the Quran. When I study a surah, I will never be able to say, I already know it. I already did it. It's going to hit, every ayah will hit you like it's never hit you before. Don't underestimate the book of Allah. Not in terms of its guidance, not in terms of its huda, not in terms of its bayyinat, not in terms of it being furqan. because it will manifest itself to you, it'll open itself to you anew every single time. Man, have I learned that lesson. You know, I was just sharing today with students, وَدَرَسُوا مَا فِيهِ وَدَرَسُوا مَا فِيهِ. Allah complained, why didn't they study what is in it? Instead of saying, why didn't they study it? Why not say I study? If you say I studied a book, you know what that means? I'm done with it. I already studied it. When you say I've studied something in it, then there's more left. There's always going to be more left when you study Quran. You'll never be able to say, I already know Fatiha. I already know Baqarah. I already know Al-Imran. You're not going to be able to say it. Because there are treasures therein that you just haven't even begun to touch. That's why Allah gave the analogy of the Quran like an ocean. When you jump into an ocean and you come out, you're drenched. Yes? You can't possibly say, I experienced the entire ocean. All you experienced were the drops that were touching your body. Those were the only drops you were able to experience. You can dive deeper and deeper and deeper, you might experience some more drops. But for someone to dive in and then come out and say, I've experienced the entire ocean, you're a fool to think that. And to think that when I dive in again, it's the same exact drops that are going to touch me. They're not. قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي. If the oceans were turned into ink for the words of my master. The parable of an ocean and the Quran is incredible. I will dive into the Quran my entire life, and all I will have is drops. That's all I will have is droplets. That's it. You know, and that's all I'm capable of. So now, going back to these three things, I'll say some comments about each of them. Hudal linnas, it's a guidance for all people. Two things to note here. The first of them is the idea of guidance. Guidance is something that you and I need when we're in trouble, when we're unsure about something, when we're going through a difficult time, a challenge in our life. I'm not sure which college to go to, who to marry, what to name my kid, where to move, how to solve this problem, how to end this conflict. That's when you and I need guidance. And when we get into trouble, we go to people we trust and we talk to them. Either you go to an expert, and get legal advice or financial advice or medical advice. That's the kind of guidance you get. Or you just need to talk to somebody about your problems and they just need to tell you, relax, it's going to be okay. That's not expert advice, that's just chill out, calm down. And you just needed to hear that and you're like, oh, thanks for saying that, it really helped me a lot. Isn't it? The Quran will be both of those things. Expert guidance on the most complicated of issues and personal counsel. Personal counsel. You and I will go through challenges in life and we're going to open up Allah's book, seeking Allah's counsel, and He's going to give it in ways that you and I have never experienced. And that is going to be your personal miracle with the Quran, that you cannot prove to anybody else. There are going to be moments in your life where nobody knows what to tell you, you can't find answers anywhere else. You open Allah's book and you start reading, and it's like this ayah just came for you. This surah just came for you. And you're like, how did He know? How did He? And you can't nobody will be able to, you can't prove this to anyone, and you can't make anyone else see what you just saw. That's hudal linnas. That personal relationship with Allah through His own words. But then I'm also fascinated by the phrase an-nas, hudal linnas. This is a month in which we engage in more worship than any other month. That's our culture. We spend more time in the masjid than any other month. We recite more Quran than any other month, right? We do more dhikr than any other month. We make more dua than any other month. But do we talk to more non-Muslims this month than any other month? Are we concerned about the rest of humanity this month than any other month? We become actually more introverted in this month than any other month. And this is the month in which Allah said this is meant as a guidance for an-nas. An-nas. I told you this entire religion is the religion of which figure? Ibrahim alayhi salam. When Ibrahim alayhi salam built that Kaaba, he called it mathabatan linnas. فَجَعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. He was hoping all humanity would one day turn towards this house. This ummah is the legacy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the fulfillment of the mission of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We, more than anyone else, is supposed to be concerned with all of humanity. Was our messenger concerned with all of humanity sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why was he concerned with all of humanity? Because of these words that Allah gave him. And He gave them these words in Ramadan. So we have to relive the mission of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the month of Ramadan. You have to relive that mission in the month. This word has to be shared with all of humanity. More this month than any other month. Look at the opportunity Allah has given humanity. Shayateen are chained. So the same people who hate Islam and shaitan constantly whispers to them, that shaitan is not giving them the extra fire. It's a time for even them to calm down and you to be able to share a word of Allah with them. Hudan linnas. Man, it's, you know, like if you think about what happened, there's not enough time, guys. If you just think about what happened in that time when the Quran came down, if you just study what was happening in the heavens, the arrangements made for the Quran to come down. And there's a reason shayateen are chained, by the way, in this month. There's a reason for that. What were the arrangements made for the Quran to come down? You know, in Surah Al-Jinn, the jinn were confused. They had no idea what's going on. They're like, we used to hang out up in the stars. It says access denied, security. We try to go to our old hangout parking lots in the galaxies somewhere, and we get meteors shot towards us, and we're like, what is happening? There's a complete lockdown of the skies. So all the jinn were stuck on the earth because they couldn't go hang out in the skies. Why are all the skies locked down and the only access is left on the earth? What is about to happen to the earth? Is there some giant thing pointing towards the earth? And we have no idea. So they said, وَنَحْنُ وَأَنَّا لَا نَدْرِي أَشَرٌّ أُرِيدَ بِمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَمْ أَرَادَ بِهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ رَشَدًا. We had no idea if some horrible thing is about to go down. They were actually not sure what's happening. And then they heard the Quran and they said, oh, that's why the skies are locked down. That's why the skies are, like, they realized this Quran locked down the 7 skies so it could descend. That's the month we're experiencing. And you're thinking that this is, if there was one time to give the word of Allah to humanity, man, this is it. This is it. How we pass by this month not realizing what it is remarkable. To me, it's just, that's a tragedy by itself. You know? That's hudan linnas. The second thing was وَبَيِّنَاتٍ مِنَ الْهُدَى. Listen to this part carefully, it's very important. Musa alayhi salam, what was his miracle? So many. The staff, the hand, right? The water parting. There's so many incredible miracles. Isa alayhi salam, what are some of his miracles? The blind, curing the blind by Allah's permission, the bird, the clay bird turning into a living bird, speaking as a baby, so many miracles, yeah? I want you to imagine that you are one of the people with Musa alayhi salam as he's parting the water. Your mouth is open, your eyes are wide, and you're going through it staring at Tawd al-Azim on both sides, and you get to the other side, and you have like, you're just, everybody's looking at everybody else like, what just happened here? And then you saw Fir'aun, you're just speechless. A few years later, you get married, you have a child, the child is 6, 7, 8 years old, you sit your kid down, and you're gonna tell him an amazing story. You know what I saw, son? We were standing right there, and this happened, and this kid's like, whoa, isn't he? But that same kid, when he turns 16, come here, son, let me tell you a story. Is that the same water story again? God. Within one generation, something that you saw with your own eyes that completely changed your appreciation of God and your awe of His Messenger, alayhi salam. For that next generation, what is it? It's a story. It's not a miracle for them, it's a story for them. They can't experience it like you did. لَيْسَ الْخَبَرْ كَالْمُعَايَنَةِ. The news is not like eyewitness account. You can't compare those two things. And as the generations go by, it's just a story, a story, a story, and actually an old story. We believe in those same stories, but we didn't see it. We didn't. We believe in it. But we're not in awe of the water parting. You can recite, إِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرَ فَأَنْجَيْنَاكُمْ, and He parted the water. Cool. Move on. But if you and I lived in that time, and we recited إِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرَ, we might even fall into sajda without even helping ourselves. We just fall. Isn't that true? All the miracles that Allah gave to prophets were miracles for eyes. They were miracles for eyes. And when you have a tough job, there's no absences allowed. And if you have an absence, you better make it up. You better make it up, isn't it? And when you won't get your certificate until you what? You finish. Allah says, وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةِ, so that you may complete the count. You must finish the entire certification. You must finish the whole thing. And when you finish, you should have a graduation ceremony. And when you have a graduation ceremony, you have a chant, you have claps. What do the Muslims have? When we celebrate, when we finish our training of Ramadan, what graduation do we have? The Eid ceremony is our graduation ceremony. And so Allah says, وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ, so you may declare the greatness of Allah based on how He guided you. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, walillahi alhamd. By the way, those words, man, they rattle me. This entire month of Quran, and then you're reciting Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. Do you know which messenger used the word Akbar? Hada Rabbi, Hada Akbar? Ibrahim alayhi salam. And you know what happened when the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca? They were shattering the idols and they were saying Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, walillahi alhamd. It is actually the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam culminated in Eid. It's so beautiful. But then there's something else. There's always something else. What is takbir? Takbir means to declare greatness. Allah is saying, now that you've completed your training, and across this training, your stomach was asghar and Allah was akbar. Your throat was asghar, Allah was akbar. Your desire was asghar, Allah was akbar. You did this for the entire month. Everything you wanted was lesser, smaller, Allah was greater, wasn't He? For the entire 30 days. Now that you've finished the count, now you're ready to declare Allah greater in everything else you do. The purpose of Ramadan is to reconnect the believer to the Book of Allah like they're starting over. And the reason that's important is because the believer is supposed to reconnect humanity with the Book of Allah. The way we do that in Ramadan, the way the first generation did that in Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ institutionalized additional prayers. Umar bin al-Khattab saw that people might lose out on that, so he made it into congregational, what we call the Taraweeh prayer. Yeah? And it became an institution in this ummah. Now that institution, if you imagine the Sahaba, every time they stood in prayer and they heard Baqarah, Ali Imran, Nisa being recited, they heard the message and they understood the message. They appreciated the miracle, all in the salah. A few centuries later, fast forward to, now 2016. We also have the Taraweeh prayer. Is there a difference between the way we conduct our prayers today and the spirit of those prayers of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu? There's a fundamental difference. The vast majority of you and me that are standing behind the Imam as he's reciting the word of Allah are not hanging over every word, lost and mesmerized in reflection. Rather, we are wondering, was that the first or the second? Are we on 14 or on 15? When is the ruku' coming? If the Imam takes so much as a long breath, you're like, and then he goes on to the next time, like, oh, okay. Some of my friends that lead Taraweeh, they're on purpose, when they get to Ayatul Kursi, they take a pause. Allahu La ilaha illahu al-hayyul qayyum. And everybody's like, oh yeah, oh God, I thought it was Allahu Akbar. What I'm trying to get at, besides the joke, is there's a tragedy in the ummah. This month was supposed to genuinely reconnect us with the guidance and the appreciation and the awe of the Quran, so it can separate right and wrong for us again. But today, our relationship with the Quran has been reduced to an artificial one, where we stand in prayer and the vast majority of us don't know what's being recited. We run after the best reciter and stand behind them and wonder why the person next to us is crying. And some people are crying because they don't understand. And that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing by itself. But then there are just a few that understand and they're moved. Sometimes the Imam himself is moved. And then we're completely okay with the culture that even the one leading us in prayer has no idea what they're reciting. And we're okay with that. We're okay with that. We've accepted that as a tradition. Yeah? Is there something wrong with this? You see some problem? We have violated the spirit of Ramadan so badly on every account. And then on top of that, if you didn't finish the recitation of the entire Quran, that's why we got to speed it up in the last few days. And there's complaints about this reciter is reciting too slowly. Who cares about finishing the Quran in Ramadan? We're in a state of emergency right now. So this is the spirit of Ramadan is lost if you didn't come out of Ramadan knowing more Quran than you did before, being in love with more Quran than you were before. Don't reduce it to something less. This is part of the fundamental goals and spirit of this month. So this was my second section.